The transport truck rolled slowly through the early morning mist. Inside the back of the military vehicle, a group of German women sat quietly on wooden benches. Most of them were nurses, radio operators, and clerks who had been captured in the final chaotic months of the war. Their uniforms were worn, their faces pale from weeks of uncertainty. No one spoke at first. The road beneath them had changed hours ago. The ruined cities and burned villages of Europe had disappeared. Instead, they had been placed on a ship, then another train, and now this truck. None of them knew exactly where they were. Some believed they had been taken to Britain. Others whispered about America. A few feared something worse. Anna, one of the older nurses, held her coat tighter around her shoulders as the truck slowed. Through the wooden slats of the truck wall she could see trees. Endless trees. Pine forests stretched as far as she could see. No bomb craters, no destroyed houses, just quiet countryside and fresh air. "This doesn't look like Europe," she murmured softly. One of the younger women leaned closer. "Maybe we're in Bavaria," she suggested hopefully. Anna didn't answer. The truck turned onto a gravel road and finally stopped in front of a large fenced compound. Wooden watchtowers stood at the corners, but the place looked strangely calm. No shouting, no chaos, just a few soldiers walking along the fence. The back door of the truck opened. Bright daylight flooded inside. "Out!" a soldier said. The women stepped down one by one, blinking in the sunlight. For a moment, none of them moved. The air smelled different, cleaner. Beyond the fence they could see fields, farmhouses, and distant hills. One of the women suddenly whispered something that made the others freeze. "Listen." From across the yard, two guards were talking, but they weren't speaking English. They were speaking German. Clear, perfect German. The prisoners looked at each other in confusion. Anna frowned. That can't be right." Another woman stepped closer to the fence, listening carefully. The guards laughed about something, continuing their conversation in fluent German, as if they were standing in the middle of a town in southern Germany. For several seconds, none of the prisoners spoke. Then the youngest one said the words that were on everyone's mind. "Are we back in Germany?" But that question would soon become even stranger, because the Canadians guarding the camp understood every word the prisoners were saying, and they had a reason for it, a very unexpected reason. The women stood in the yard, still trying to understand what they had just heard. German, not broken German. Not a few memorized words. Fluent German. Anna slowly stepped closer to the fence while the others watched the two guards across the yard. The soldiers were standing beside a wooden gate, drinking coffee from metal cups and talking casually. One of them laughed. "Nein. Du hast es völlig falsch verstanden," the soldier said. The words were clear, perfect pronunciation. The prisoners stared at each other in disbelief. "That's impossible," one of the younger women whispered. "They must be Germans." Anna shook her head slowly. "No, look at the uniforms." She pointed carefully. The soldiers were not wearing German uniforms. The cut of the jackets was different. The helmets were different, and on one sleeve a small patch with a maple leaf was clearly visible. Another prisoner frowned. Maybe they captured German uniforms?" "No," Anna said quietly. "Those are Allied uniforms." At that moment, one of the guards noticed them watching. He walked toward the fence calmly. The women immediately fell silent. The soldier stopped a few meters away and looked at them for a moment. His expression wasn't hostile. If anything, he looked slightly amused. Then he spoke, in German. "Guten Morgen." Several of the women gasped. The guard continued casually. "You must be wondering where you are." No one answered. The women looked at each other, unsure whether they should speak. Finally, Anna gathered her courage. "Germany?" she asked cautiously. For a moment, the soldier simply stared at her. Then he smiled slightly and shook his head. "No," he said. "You are in Canada." The word hit them like a shock. Canada. It sounded unreal. One of the younger women stepped forward immediately. "But how do you speak German?" The soldier shrugged. "Well," he replied calmly, Half the villages around here speak it." The women froze. "What do you mean?" Anna asked. The guard pointed toward the distant hills beyond the camp. "There are towns nearby where people came from Germany, Austria, and Eastern Europe generations ago." He paused, then added something that made the situation even stranger. "Some of the farmers outside the camp probably speak better German than you do." The prisoners stared at him in stunned silence. A place thousands of kilometers away, where strangers spoke their language, where the forests looked like home, where even the guards understood every word they said. For the first time since their capture, the women realized something unexpected. They were prisoners, but they were not in a hostile land. And what they would soon discover about life inside this Canadian camp would shock them even more. The news spread through the women's barracks that evening. They were in Canada. At first, many of them simply refused to believe it. Anna sat on the lower bunk near the small window, staring out at the dark forest beyond the camp fence. The air smelled like pine and cold earth. Somewhere far away, a train whistle echoed across the valley. It didn't feel like a prison. It felt quiet, almost peaceful. Across the room, several of the younger women were still arguing. "It doesn't make sense," one of them insisted. "Why would Canadians speak German?" Another shook her head. "Maybe it's a trick." Anna finally turned toward them. "No," she said calmly, "it's not a trick." She pointed toward the hills beyond the camp. The guard told the truth. The next morning, they began to understand what he meant. Just after sunrise, several trucks arrived at the camp gate. A Canadian officer stepped out and spoke briefly with the guards. Then a list of names was called. Anna's name was among them. The selected women climbed into the back of a transport truck. No one told them where they were going. The gate opened. For the first time since arriving, they were leaving the camp. The truck rolled down the dirt road, and soon the watchtowers disappeared behind the trees. The women watched quietly as the forest opened into farmland. Wide fields stretched across the countryside, wooden barns, small houses, smoke rising from chimneys. It looked nothing like the ruined Europe they had left behind. The truck slowed as they approached a small village, and that was when the real shock happened. Several villagers were standing near a wooden fence watching the truck arrive. An older man lifted his hat politely. Then he called out something to the driver, in German. "Guten Morgen! Lange Fahrt gehabt!" The women inside the truck froze. Another villager laughed and replied, also in German. Soon, several voices joined the conversation. Men, women, even a few children standing near a farmhouse, all speaking German. Anna leaned forward, gripping the wooden side of the truck. This can't be real," one of the younger prisoners whispered. But it was real. The truck stopped beside a large farm. A tall farmer walked toward them, wiping his hands on a cloth. He looked at the women and smiled kindly. Then he said something that none of them expected, also in German. "Don't worry," he said. "You're safe here." The women looked at each other in complete disbelief. Thousands of kilometers from home. Across an ocean. In a country they had never seen before. And yet, the language, the forests, the farms, even the voices of the villagers sounded strangely familiar. For the first time since the war had taken everything from them, the prisoners felt something they hadn't expected. Not fear, not hatred, but something quieter, something human. Relief. And in that quiet Canadian valley, far away from the destruction of Europe, the war suddenly felt very far away.